Music has an incredible capacity to connect us, amplify voices that aren't always heard, and open doors to a more inclusive tomorrow. That's why we support Canadian music with a focus through the TD Ready commitment on experiences that bring people together and break down barriers even when we're apart.
Welcome everyone to the third week of our weekly Jazzlabs series presented by TD Bank Group. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory and ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we all need to take meaningful steps in reconciliation and the continued efforts of a strong nation-to-nation relationship. We recognize that we need to respect Indigenous sovereignty and rights to the land that we occupy. We would like to acknowledge the support of the Government of Canada, the Province of Nova Scotia, and the Municipality of Halifax. I would also like to extend a very special thanks to our title sponsor, TD. We are also grateful for the support of our many festival partners, Advocate Printing and Publishing, Stingray Radio, CTV, and Insight Optometry. And finally, a big thanks to the Lighthouse and the entire team at Rock Band Productions for delivering all of our virtual performances this summer. So welcome to the Art of Improvisation with New Hermitage. New Hermitage is an improvised music ensemble from Halifax who brings together an incredibly wide range of musical backgrounds amongst its members. We have Adrian McKelvey on saxophone, India Gailey on cello, Ross Burns guitar, and missing today is Ellen Gibling who plays the harp, and they each inject their own influence into the music and its performance. So please welcome our guest for today. Hey friends.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. So we're gonna have a fun time in our session today. So I guess we'll kind of start off. I want to know, how did this group come together?
Sure. So we met through the Creative Music Workshop, which was put together by our teacher, our dear teacher who just passed away, Jerry Granelli. And through the Creative Music Workshop, which teaches improvised music and improvisation, teaches what we call capital M music, we met each other and found we had an affinity for playing together.
So sorry for that interruption. We're just going to hop right back into it and talking about the individual and group musical inspirations.
Sure. So what did I say? I said so many musical inspirations. Lots of saxophone players in different groups. Groups like Bad Plus, or like people like Meta Henrietta, Briggen Krause, Jerry, obviously huge influence. But then also influenced a lot by things that aren't necessarily musical from a certain point of view. Things like the sound of a space or like a room, the sound of daily life, sounds of nature, and trying to like incorporate. I get like a really weird, long, esoteric rant about some of this stuff, but like trying to incorporate the patterns of life into the playing.
That's awesome. Yeah, what about you, India?
Yeah, life, all of my life. In undergrad, I got really into contemporary classical music and researching and listening to that, and language a lot. And then all sorts of other stuff too, like Radiohead and fiddle music and you know.
That's awesome. What about you, Ross?
The first thing that comes to my mind is all of my teachers over the years. I mean, there's so many ways to answer this like really deep question about how you get here musically, but I really like India's reference to all these extra musical things. That's really rings true to me. But it seems like a good, like you can focus that in on the mentors and the teachers who have, you know, whose paths have crossed with yours and who were important. This instrument. And then my band mates and like contemporaries are my teachers as well, in that same breath. Like in every musical situation I've been in, I really profoundly feel like the people I play with are deeply influencing me. And not just musically, but also like how to be in and around performing, but also just walking around everyday life. So it's great. I think being a musician, being lucky enough to be in contexts like this, you have so many teachers that are just your peers. Like I've learned so much from these guys. So yeah, that's the second thing I think about. First, my teachers, and secondly, all my peers who are actually also just my teachers.
Awesome. I'm loving the sentimental feel.
Oh yeah, big hug.
Love it. Love it. So given all of your individual styles and inspirations, as we've talked about, how would you say that's added to your sound and how you approach improvisation versus, you know, typical jazz improvisation? What makes it different?
I mean, I might say, to jump in, that because this band started with a very clear vision from Andrew, that we all had a very clear idea, like a very clear starting point together, which is, it was a very clear but also kind of unique musical vision. Like often in a musical situation, you play some tunes and it's very codified, and there's a certain amount of execution of what's on in front of you, but the vision to play in this certain way together is a very process-driven inspiration, very clear set of guidelines that's put us on this path to doing what we do.
But relating it back to sort of more traditional jazz sort of setting, this does come from that lineage, because like the people who are here in this room are here because of who like they are. Like this might not work with just any cellist. It needs to be this cellist, you know, and like it needs to be this guitar player, and like there's a very specific reason why we're here, which goes back to like the early. It's all throughout jazz. Like the Duke Ellington Orchestra works because Duke's writing for Harry Carney.
Yeah.
And he's not writing for like any saxophone player.
Right.
He's writing for this saxophone player, or like any of the like great Miles Davis groups or anything like that. Like you have these ensembles that it's not just the intention. It's incredibly intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a thing that you see in all improvisation, that people tend to not necessarily understand when improvising. They're like, oh, like you're doing what you feel. It's in the moment. It's neat. Well, yeah, no, for sure. But there's an intentionality there too that's set up in advance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why these people are here in this room.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance of intention, but also like wholly working with what is here now. It's like not only here now as we are as people, but in the spaces that we inhabit, and the things that arise in the moments together. And then that thing changes as we go along.
Yeah.
And the intention changes, but there is an intention.
And we've been together for about 5 years now, so
Yeah,
like we've
wow.
changed.
Yeah.
You know, so it's interesting to listen back.
I'm just the same. I'm totally the same. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
That's
I
not
haven't
true,
evolved at all.
Ross.
Yeah, I just maybe the biggest. I keep thinking about these what feel like non-musical, because it's not like notes or sounds in particular, but like there's a certain trust that exists in this group that I rely on. It sort of feels like maybe the most important, empowering, and influential thing when we're playing together is fully trusting each other and our process together, and then also fully trusting that, you know, that everyone trusts me just as much as I trust them, so that it sets up an environment where we can, you know, it is obviously exacting and rigorous. Like, there are things you could do where you could violate that trust. So it actually, you know, it steers you towards the vision, but it also really holds you up. Like, it feels like I'm safe here to like fully express and follow the capital M music, because I know that they know me, we know each other, and they won't accuse me of being here for myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we all know that we're here actually for this musical goal, this artistic goal.
The cool thing, something you said there, I just want to jump on real quick, is like talking about it feels safe, and I totally feel that like trust. But I think about something that Jerry would say sometimes, where he's like, you know, this is a safe space, but that doesn't mean it's a comfortable space, you know, and like that's what's really cool. I think part of that trust is that we can get into these situations that maybe feel deeply, musically, maybe like incredibly, what some people might think as being really dissonant or uncomfortable. But as we've talked so much about life and us bringing life into it, well, that is a real important part of life, is that just sitting with this discomfort. You know, life's not always, as we've discovered over the last like year and a half, and I mean, for all of us, but humanity is this kind of suffering, and sitting with this this discomfort, or sitting with other emotions other than just making music that makes people feel joy is.
Right. It's not all major triads.
Yeah.
Life is suffering.
Yeah. I think
very
if
inspirational, very light.
If we want to get any point across today, let's bring to the camera and say this. If we can get any point across today, it's that
Life is suffering.
we're just suffering. We're suffering through it.
We're trying to do it gracefully, as graceful as we can. Oh, wow. So I want to
With
touch...
incredible joy.
Yes, seriously. We make suffering look really good every time.
I mean, yeah, that art is the expression of and the antidote, as much as it's possible to that thing. So yeah.
I don't know why this is bringing tears of joy to my eyes. It's very strange.
Wow, improv and inspiration from New Hermitage, everyone. I like where we're going. I want to touch on something that all three of you kind of mentioned, was just like this trust and understanding one another, and I think that really speaks to like the individual vocabulary and understanding that and developing that vocabulary as an ensemble. And so how can people develop this individually or as a group from your experience?
Well, it's a very good question. You know, there are lots of things you can do in terms of developing like trust as an ensemble. I think like rehearsing, spending time together, and you know, being willing to like be vulnerable and having that vulnerability be accepted is really important. But in terms of how to like develop that or develop just like the ability to play together, that comes from like rehearsing together a lot. Like when we first got together, we rehearsed every week for like a year at least, and then.
And how long would you practice for?
2 hours. And that process was developing. Well, like we're going to talk a little bit about our individual processes of developing vocabulary, but to rehearse like that, so we would improvise a piece, and then just discuss it like really frankly, because in this practice, this lineage that we've been taught, it's always about the work. So when you walk in, you kind of leave some of that ego behind, or you try to. You try hard to.
It's a process, yeah.
Yeah, it's a process. And then when we talk to each other, it's more about like when I say something to you, or say something to somebody in the band, or they say something to me, it's not about me personally, it's about this work that we're doing together, which is a really interesting way of approaching it. I know when I was in music school, and we don't have to talk about music school, let's not talk about music school, but like it can be really about like you really attach a lot of self-worth to your playing, and they become really tangled up. So in this process, it's kind of like untangling that a little bit, at least for me. Maybe. Yeah. That's the subtext of what I'm doing. But.
Yeah, in fact, just a few weeks ago, the last time that I know we were in a room together, last time I saw Jerry, he was talking about the transparency of playing music in this fashion. So you're trying to get completely out of the way so that, you know, it's not you, it's not about you, you're know, behaving like a transparent kind of conduit to what needs to happen at any given moment. So, which is very different than when I was growing up trying to like, in a more almost like sport kind of mentality, trying to get faster and be better and be the best one that I could. But I didn't realize at that time that technique and ability and practice just serves actually fading into the background and serving the art, as opposed to putting yourself in the foreground as the art itself. You know, it's.
But to that point of serving the music, everybody is going to serve the music based off of their influence and experience, like you asked before, which is why it sometimes works with like the player. It's about having a certain group of people, because you know that what they're going to serve the music in a way that's like particular to them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because you kind of already mentioned this earlier, when you were kind of you were in between like two different boxes and trying to come out of that box. And as we're kind of talking about, you know, being transparent as a classical musician, what was that experience like for you?
Being transparent as a classical musician. Yeah, I guess I feel like I've rejected the idea of boxes. Yeah, the work that we do in this band, I feel like is not in any particular codified category of music. Like I think we were nominated, or we won a classical music award one time. Yeah, and I guess a lot of the work that I was exploring within the contemporary classical world was like meeting this kind of improvisatory jazz world, and just from a different angle. It was like all these different minds in the last century were sort of getting at the same thing from different places, like arriving somewhere just on a different journey. And it's like I feel like this band really embodies that, like all these different lineages meeting and arriving at this thing, which is really just like music from the moment, bringing along what we've gone through. I don't know, is that coherent statements that I'm making? I'm just checking. Okay.
Yeah, rings true.
Yeah, so it's like you've got all these people in contemporary classical music in the last 50 years who are exploring like little cells of material that could be in any order, or open scores, graphic scores, and the listening to the soundscape of an environment and responding to that musically. I just think it's really cool how these ideas of genre are kind of dissolving right now. At least it feels that way to me. I feel like I'm one of those dots that's sort of dissolving along with them.
That's awesome. I think too, like with that thought of genres dissolving, that leaves more creative room to, come up with concepts, and it does leave more room for improvisation, and it leads us to question like what is jazz, what is classical, you know what I mean? And so I think that kind of is a great segue into the topic of technique and concepts. And I know you want to play a bit, these instruments are not just for decoration. So
So what we were thinking, we might talk a little bit about some of our own individual vocabularies, things that we've developed in our improvisations and that we use, and then maybe we'll just kind of demonstrate how they might come together. So does anybody have a real urge to go first, or?
I had an urge to ask India to demonstrate some of the inside and outside of the difference between the sounds that you were talking about in that piece, the papillon discovery that you made.
The difference between them?
Or like a very very recognizably classical music approach, and then some of the different techniques that you might use to get non-cello sounds out of the cello.
Okay, yeah, I guess the typical cello sound is very recognizable, like the or like the that's my classical music face.
You can really hear it.
Yeah.
It's like focused on a really like full tone, which I still practice every day. But I guess a lot of the sounds that I like to use are playing with the timbre a lot, using different positions of the bow to bring out certain overtones, and also using a lot of harmonics and different levels of pressure to like get different levels of scratch. So like this is all present in that piece that inspired me so much, because there's all this stuff that's like fluttery. That kind of thing. And like
beautiful.
Using all these gradual transformations of sound. Which is basically my vocabulary.
Yeah, I've heard those licks before, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just plagiarizing.
I love that. You know what that reminds me of? So I was trying to avoid mentioning this, but fun fact, India and I kind of played the cello together at one point in life. It's not here. It's fine. But I used to do that stuff as a joke before practice, just to clear my mind. It was let me get all this, I was stressed out in high school apparently. So, it was just I'm there getting ready for rehearsal, and then you tune up and there's nothing going on. So you just mess around and make these non-classical sounds. So you just feel like you're just goofing off, but it's musical. And so it's really interesting that you're introducing this as like part of your vocabulary, and I was just doing it for fun, not thinking I was doing anything creative.
You could have turned that goofing off into cold hard cash.
Wow, seriously. I missed that on something.
That improvisation cash.
Yeah.
But it's true, like that's kind of I know for myself in terms of developing a vocabulary, it is sort of that willingness to sort of look at this instrument and be like, well, I'm just gonna play with it.
Yeah, you're just experimenting.
What does it do? Like, what are all the sounds that it can make, whatever, right? It just thinking of this or any of these instruments as just like an object that makes sound.
Right.
Talking about going back to boxes, like there is like the cello or like the saxophone, and like the saxophone even has like the way you play like classical saxophone versus the way you play like a jazz saxophone or like pop saxophone. The techniques are all a little different, actually, even too. So for me, a really cool experience over the last like decade or so has been to take a step back and think about the saxophone as like a sound object.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like taking into account, all of the sounds that the instrument can make. Yeah. Like it's not just how you've been trained, but you can make different sounds and do different things with any instrument.
And they're all equal.
Yeah.
We weren't really trained to think about them as all equal, but absolute, like
when you're taught to play a certain way, you're not thinking about the other things that the instrument can do, right? So
I tell my students, like when they squeak, they'll be like, they'll squeak and they'll flinch, they're like, no, like remember that. Like 15 years, you're gonna be like searching for that again.
Can you give us a squeak?
Well, yeah, because like sometimes when people are playing, like especially when they're trying to go down into like the lower register, they might go like they might pop out something really high like that. And they'll try to play like a low C, and they'll do something like that instead because their embouchure's not quite set right. I'm like, oh, but that's actually a really amazing like. Add the tongue in there, do some, not necessarily traditional tonguing things, but it's also just an appendage, whatever. Right?
Yeah, beautiful.
So that's some stuff that like you kind of access through making like a mistake. Like you have to kind of enter that Wayne Shorter mindset of like there are no mistakes, there's just opportunities. And then in terms of like thinking about this as a like a sound device, then you can start like taking stuff apart. Like if I take the mouthpiece off, you can make some really interesting sounds. Like if you're gonna buzz into it like a trumpet, maybe. I mean that's kind of fun, but even that seems like really pretty straight ahead.
Is that what you're doing when you make the kind of like faraway bugle in the forest kind of sound?
Yeah, totally.
I like that one.
You can do them, but I like to make stuff like using the breath. So thinking about for like wind players, anybody who's watching is like a wind player, you can think about that the instrument doesn't end with the instrument. It actually goes like into your face and into your body. So your whole body. Jerry's thing. Back to Jerry. Jerry's thing was like the first instrument is the body, and with a wind instrument, that's like especially true in that like the piping actually goes down to here, So then thinking of stuff like, I think about breath all the time, just using my breath to make sound. So putting just air through the horn. And then how do I stop and start that air? So then it opens up just so much more color. You can start thinking about adding things, building on all that stuff. Start moving things.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, in my that rings really true. Also, this experience of like trying to go outside of the instrument, because in a way, in this band, I try not to play guitar as much as possible. like I'm using a guitar, but I'm not trying to, play some
Play some
guitaristic.
chords.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's not. There's a lot of really idiomatic stuff that the guitar is accustomed to doing, like. And that is not part of the agreement we have together.
That's not it at all.
I would be violating the trust to access very certain things that are just like highly evocative of a capital G guitar thing. And, most guitarists, at least grow up playing, trying to make a really clean, clear, like Indy was talking about, beautiful sound between here and here, and it kind of stops there. And you try to get these sounds. But in this band, there's a lot of opportunity because of the fact that we're exploring beyond, the conventional territory. Then opens up a lot of non-guitar type flavors. I mean, I find using a lot of pedals and things. Like often I'll find myself trying to be the bass player in the band, like exploring this kind of register. Using different electronic opportunities to not be a guitarist. Sometimes it can be percussive, like things that aren't that are maybe feel less guitar-y and more drummy. Things with less harmonic information, more textural stuff. And then also really nice to explore things that are just highly textural and not really tonal in any kind of way, like with a lot of sometimes it's just something as simple as a little bit of
Wind?
just, it creates an atmosphere that influences the space and interacts with the space without, so playing guitar isn't kind of the intention there. It's like using this to make something that actually participates in the sonic environment.
Yeah.
And like sits in a place or provides a texture that something can cut across of or someone can meet in a sort of a unison or there's a lot of opportunity to do things that aren't what the first guitar lessons involved.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
I guess in that sense, just listening to you talk right now, it's like, yeah, because maybe you aren't a guitar player, or like I'm not a saxophone, we're a composer. So like it's finding space, finding space within the piece to serve the music. What does the music need right now?
And what tools do you have with you?
So I have to take it, yeah.
Right. It's like if you needed to build something and you were on a desert island and you just happened to have a guitar, it's like, okay, I figure out how to do that with this.
Yeah.
And the idea, like thinking in a composerly fashion, or maybe through another lens, like a producer of music as opposed to as an instrumentalist, is kind of nice because it's like you hear the setting and in a kind of like a producer behind the scenes would be like, what this needs is not me taking a solo. It needs it needs some of this, like something like this. So here, what about this? Composer or producer is as much the mentality in some ways as instrumentalist.
Yeah. And when we enter that way of thinking about it too, it kind of removes I definitely do sometimes some like saxophone type things, and enter that role of like being like the saxophone player, which tends to be more of, at least in an instrumental group, it tends to be more of like a front person playing a melody, playing a solo thing. But from this producer or composer standpoint too, then it frees you to step outside of your role. So not just step outside of your instrument, but step outside of maybe your role. Like, can I also be the drummer?
Yeah.
Or like, can I take the role of the drummer? I'm never gonna be the drummer. Like, I'm not a drummer. But this is kind of like a drum in some ways, you know, or even just that mentality of what does it mean to like hold something down while other people spread out, or how can I like be like a chordal accompanying instrument to another person, even though that's not what my instrument does, you know. It's entering into those other roles, the philosophical vocabulary of the band, to like remove the hierarchy of like hierarchical structures, whether they be musical or personal.
Yeah. I feel like if I were to advise someone, maybe you, I don't know, on like developing one's personal musical vocabulary, say like find the sounds that you like on your instrument and explore like all the possibilities within that one sound. Like how many different ways could you expand or contract or vary that one thing, and then what are the other sounds? And the sound could be even something like a mode, a scale. It doesn't have to be something like you know, like like we like that stuff. Maybe you like different stuff. But yeah, how could those different sounds that you like be combined? And then so finding the outer limits and territories of your own vocabulary. And then what we do in our group is like, what are all the ways we could combine all of these individual vocabularies we have? And like, just as you were saying, like, what if you were the drummer? Or like, what if you were the cellist? And, like, it's like just constantly exploring what are the ways we haven't done this yet. But like, I don't even know if I'm even like asking myself that question all the time, because it's like already naturally different every time. It's like, well, what is happening? And if I feel something is like needing to go somewhere else, that's when I ask myself the questions of like, well, what if I did it this different way?
Yeah. What does the music need?
Yeah.
What does the music need, and what can I give it?
Yeah.
For big ones.
Am I just being habitual here, or is this like, what is actually natural and insightful in this moment?
Yeah, that's definitely the deep listening aspect.
Yeah.
Of it's like hearing the entirety, so listening to everybody, and having the music then start to like tell you what to do, and then too, I know it's that same thing. If you're not hearing what to do.
Yeah, silence is a great option.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Yeah, that's when some really amazing, beautiful things happen. Because then that trust of playing too, it's totally cool to have like I know that I trust that like if we are all kind of wrapping down, and like you are continuing to play, I'm like, well, India must hear something.
And if we are thinking about this as a composer, as a composition, like as if we had written a score outside of the room and handed it to these musicians, maybe it ends with a solo, or maybe there's 5 pages where Andrew and I just have rests, just tacit, and then those are all potentially great compositional choices.
This is maybe I've told you about this. This is perhaps really weird, but I'd like to share it with the internet. Is that like, I sometimes, or a long time ago, I used to think that like, about like multiple realities, talking about scores, but multiple realities, and imagining that like kind of improvised music on like another reality is like really thought out, written like classical music. And that when we're improvising, we're just peeking through realities to a score in another dimension. And that music's already written.
Yeah.
Which is another approach you can take to improvising.
Try that at home.
It takes the pressure off to be like, well, in some version of reality, this is like a top 40 hit. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just famous in a different dimension, you know? world renowned in Hermitage.
That's right. These are the licks that all guitarists learn first.
Right.
This is Stairway to Heaven.
Literally out of this world.
You get us.
I understand. Number one on the Billboard charts somewhere, all the time. It's been consistent, never left. I love it.
Having those kind of thoughts might help. Might help figure out this stuff. You're like,
This is normal for somebody. I think I like it. I think it challenges the norm and what people think, what music really is. I know that when we had the poetry jam event and you were all playing for these spoken word artists, it was a different experience, and I feel like it really created like an environment outside of just the words, and that's part of what you do, the experience that you bring to any type of stage, in person or virtual. And so I think it's time we kind of give people a little taste of this other dimension, this other dimensional music,
sure.
another reality.
Yeah.
I don't know who else is ready to go to another reality, but please put on your seatbelts. I don't know where we're going, but
Well, we'll play a piece. We'll improvise something,
Yeah.
and you might hear some of the vocabulary we described.
that's a question I have. Do you have written pieces? Do you score anything, or is it?
That's a great question, actually. So what we're gonna play today will probably be totally improvised. We do have some pieces. Like when we first started, especially I wrote some things down as kind of like a little catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is that material is always there. It's always available to us, although we don't necessarily go back to it very much. But we played a dawn concert at Long Lake a day or two ago, and we played some of that music. And yeah, but to answer your question, it's nothing's. We don't write things down that much. We do sometimes, and sometimes it comes out of the improvisation. We'll be like, oh, that was great. Let's codify that. We're working with a dance troupe right now, a really amazing project with Rebecca Lazier called Everywhere the Edges, which will be premiering in February. Really amazing piece with dancers in these...
Giant hammocks.
Yeah,
Whoa.
essentially they're giant hammocks. They have these really beautiful nets that Janet Eckelman, American textile artist made. And that'll be in
They're much fancier than hammocks are. That
They're-
was probably disparaging for me to say.
They're like the most beautiful hammock but they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous. So for that, we're improvising with the dancers and then going back through later and codifying it and refining the improvisation into like a piece.
Nice.
So we come at kind of both ways. It's either totally improvised, written, or written from improvisation.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, sorry, Janet, got your name wrong there. But let's play.
She's probably not watching. What if she is?
Oh, we can send her the link.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I was like, I don't know how to come in and like not be like. I was just here like, wow. I felt like, you know, like that scene in like Willy Wonka when they like walk into the factory for the first time. They're just like, wow, all this chocolate. Like, yeah, wow, this is like on Facebook. Anyway, that's kind of how I felt. I was like, it's just like you didn't want to like miss a moment because it's improvised, so it's literally it's unique to the time and space that we're in. And I was like, there's so much going on, and I was trying to catch all the things, and I was like, how's India doing that? And I was like, India's doing something really cool, but I'm trying not to miss what's going on here. And I liked how everyone kind of took their own space, like they found this, I don't know, this like sweet spot, and they just played with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really beautiful.
There's a harmony that comes from whatever material, like whatever space you found or what material you find, just like staying there too, rather than rifling through. I mean, that's definitely something that I try to keep in mind. It's like not going through too much different material, because each one of those things could be a lifetime. Like India was talking about, like you couldn't really dive into any one piece of material, a scale or a sound, so yeah, you can actually do the music a favor by not like throwing that piece away before throwing away that inspiration or that material before you've gotten what you wanted out of it.
That's definitely like in the early days of this group, how we talked about how we were going to play together, and that idea of not throwing things away, and India's idea of we're sitting through something and finding all those possibilities. That was how we initially started improvising. It's like, let the material tell you what the next piece of material is. So like if you sit with one idea for long enough, eventually you will pass through it to the next, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know, when you're driving somewhere, you just don't magically arrive there.
Right.
You know, to get to Montreal, you have to drive down like the St. Lawrence River, and that's really beautiful. You wouldn't want to rush that. Getting from point A to point B is actually the really beautiful part, almost more than the points themselves.
And sometimes you just might spontaneously decide to go a different route.
Yeah.
You know? Or maybe there's construction.
You make a lot of assumptions.
Your car breaks down in Edmundston.
Yeah.
It's a whole different composition. Yeah.
That's great.
Or you found the best chips at the gas station.
Now
The
that.
bridge, what?
Well, this is great. I don't know if there's any other points you want to end off on. I thought that was amazing. It's
Other
like,
questions? Do
is it?
people
I
have
don't know.
questions?
I don't know if we have a way to even get questions. If there are questions,
Well,
are there any? I don't know. Audience, this is your chance.
If you have questions, you can find us on social media and ask
Sure
them to
can.
us. You know, which would be like at New Hermitage on everything. We're pretty easy to find. There's the other New Hermitage is in Russia. It's a museum in Russia, so we're not them.
Okay.
We're the local improvising group.
Asterisks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, you can find us, and if you want to hear about anything that we have coming up, send us a message and we can add you to our mailing list, or you can follow us on Bandcamp and get onto our mailing list that way too. But that's the best way to hear about concerts and secret concerts, and we're gonna be doing
secret concert.
we're gonna be doing more of those. That was really fun. So yeah, so
Cool.
you can find us online if you want to follow us or ask us any questions about what you saw today. And if you have any other questions too, the CMW is doing some stuff in August. Creative Music Workshop is doing some stuff in August that the Jazz Festival is putting on. Thank you for that, by the way.
No problem.
And,
I'm Jazz Fest.
Yeah, you can check out more discussions on improvisation and free improvisation there. So.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a beautiful note to end on, literally, figuratively. Haha. Anyway, I just want to thank you once again for participating in this Jazz Lab. Super great to hang out with you friends in this setting, because it's a little different than when I usually see you all. But this is great. I hope everyone at home enjoyed and learned something new and played with some sounds. I feel like going home and making some sounds on my cello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we'll see how it goes. I can like come into a rehearsal or something. We'll see.
Yeah, let's play.
Sweet.
Maybe one day. But yeah, thank you so much to our title sponsor, TD, and all of our remaining sponsors and partners. Join us next week. We have the Miseducation of Hip Hop with Dilshan Warasingi. And the following week, we have Discovering Your Sound with Kirsten Olivia. So 2 more exciting Jazzlabs we have coming up. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you next Saturday. Hi, Mom. Bye, Mom.
Music has an incredible capacity to connect us, amplify voices that aren't always heard, and open doors to a more inclusive tomorrow. That's why we support Canadian music with a focus through the TD Ready commitment on experiences that bring people together and break down barriers even when we're apart.